in one sentence, why should anyone choose to study at the University of Manitoba?
That's a great question. I can't do it in one sentence. There are so many things. But I would say flexibility, affordability, and quality education and student experience are all probably those top reasons why someone should choose the University of Manitoba.
Okay. So can you, because during your presentation, you actually didn't mention much about short-term programs, non-degree programs, professional development programs, and even postgraduate programs. Can you say something about those ones?
Yeah, so it's not my area of expertise, but we do have some postgraduate programs at the University of Manitoba, business administration, human resources, areas like that, as well as we offer master's and PhD programs at the University of Manitoba as well. So if anyone has questions about that, you can certainly direct those to Arrows, and I can't answer them specifically, but I can certainly put you in touch with some contact people for you in these program areas. Okay, so we don't have a specific acceptance rate. We do, our enrollment numbers have steadily increased every year for the last 8 years. We just tipped the 30,000 student mark here this fall for the first time ever at the University of Manitoba. We don't have our finalized numbers yet, but we most recently were at over 19% international students. We have a pretty high volume of applications, especially students who are working with educational consultants like Arrows. Generally, students are well aware of the procedures, the application process, the documents that are required, and have a pretty good idea of those admission requirements. And so generally, students who are working with consultants will have a more successful progression into their studies because they're just meeting all of the requirements and getting all the documents that are required for university application. Okay, so we've already talked about the scholarships and those entrance scholarships that we talked about. I mean, Adriana spoke to it. They're available to entering students, international students. For those of you coming from Malaysia, Southeast Asia, from all over Africa, those entrance scholarships are going to be applicable to you. Again, they are merit-based, based on 5 different academic subjects. Those are specific to our entrance scholarships. And then, as Adriana mentioned, you know, depending on how you're doing once you become a university student, for high achievers like Adriana, you'll continue to get those merit-based scholarships handed over to you. We have an accessibility office at the University of Manitoba. So for any folks who need some additional support with vision, hearing, access to different study spaces, exam spaces at the University of Manitoba, we do have an accessibility office who works very closely with students. So there is an application procedure. Students right off the hop are going to meet with an accessibility advisor to make sure that we're getting the supports needed for students to be successful in their studies. Okay, we talked about that, so I won't answer the cost of living and monthly living costs, which is, I mentioned earlier, rent is about just over $1,000 a month Canadian. Yeah, so we did talk about our foundation program. So for those of you who are completing completing the SPM, then we would be recommending ICM, so the International College of Manitoba, which is our partner pathway program at the University of Manitoba. It's wonderful to hear that you work with a lot of students interested in PhD. So something to keep in mind, again, it's a little bit outside of scope for me, but something to keep in mind that for those looking for a PhD, one of the first steps to this is actually connecting with an advisor who will support those students throughout their PhD. So there is a very specific application process on our Faculty of Graduate Studies website. And so that would be a place that I would encourage ARROs and students to start to look at the process. We have a wide range of programs, but it's just ensuring that we have the academic supports that are available for you as a graduate student. Again, these are really very specific graduate level questions, which are just outside of scope. So I will maybe just defer to the next question and we can just focus on our undergraduate programs. We don't have an SAT score requirement and our TOEFL requirement is an 86. That's what I mentioned earlier, that really one of the first steps is just making sure that you get those academic connections at the University of Manitoba before that you can be prepared to study at the graduate level. Can I get admitted without proof of IELTS? Yes, so I mentioned earlier that we will offer conditional admission to anyone who meets our academic admission requirements, but does not have that English test or doesn't meet our English requirements. So for anyone who doesn't have that proof of English test or doesn't meet it, then you would be starting in the English Language Center before progressing to university studies. It's the number one way to ensure that your success once you get to university studies. So our program requirements do vary significantly. So there isn't one set GPA requirement to come to the University of Manitoba, to transfer to the University of Manitoba. All of our programs have a different set of admission requirements, and those are very clearly laid out in our application bulletins for the different program areas at the University of Manitoba.